I can
What?
play the agent of chaos and come in like I think I know what I'm talking about.
Hello and welcome to the QUACKCAST. This is the Drunkduck QUACKCAST. This is QUACKCAST 519, I believe. I'm Ozone Ocean, and with me is Tance, Baines, and Pit Face. Yeah.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello guys. We're talking about we're stealing a QUACKCAST idea from a news post, as we often do, and this is from Claire, and she wrote about infodumps, as you all know, because news posts are a great place to have fantastic news to read. Oh god, this is really amateur infodump because my brain's not really working. But you know, infodumps are like we're like giving you a lot of information with not much context and not much other like ancillary stuff, just the information, and it kind of breaks from the story a bit because we as an author just want to rush through this and give you this information so you can participate in the story at the particular level that we want you to, and it's going to take too long to introduce that to the story in any other way. That's how really what an infodump is. Because if an infodump is like incorporated so much in the story that you don't notice it, it's not an infodump anymore. It's just part of the story. So that's what we're going to talk about. But we have to bring up the featured comic. Featured comic I did this week was called Frey Falls. So here you go. Hello, I'm Ozone Ocean, and my feature for the week was Frey Fall. Kitsune and Chilo are busy working on Alla's Cassowary farm, making sure those big nasty birds don't escape into the demon-infested areas of the world outside Safe Zone 3. It's a tough job, and the temptation to mess around is just too great for them. They're fighters, so rough and tumble comes naturally to them. Let's just hope they don't have to test their skills against a demon. There's going to be a whole lot more to the story than this, though. This is an action-adventure sci-fi fantasy comic. It starts off fast and gets right into things with a very short prologue. The art is all digital in black and white and grey, stylized, charming in its individuality. Frey is also the author of the long-running comic End Look, which you can totally check out on the Drunk Duck as well, on the Duck. So have a look. There'll be a link to that somewhere. Anyway, enjoy Frey Fall. That was our featured comic, Frey Fall. Next up, we have the theme. Gumwalls has given us a theme to terraforming this week, so I'm just gonna tell you about that now. This week, Gumwalls has given us the theme to terraforming. Yacht rock into the dreamy sunset, over slowly rolling waves, waves of heavy liquid golden pink, sailing into an unlikely sunset, rough waters ahead, choppy seas and changing breezes. Where will it all lead? So, take it away, Gumwallace, with the theme to terraforming. that was the theme to Terraforming, which is an interesting little comic. Old comic from many years ago on Drunkduck, starting to update again. Okay. Before we get back into the QUACKCAST, here's a word from our sponsor.
Hello, Bill Duck here. You know, being an adventuring hero can get rather stressful at times. And when I come home from a long day of recovering lost idols and kicking Nazis in the face, I like nothing better than to kick back and relax with the mellow, refreshing taste of Foul cigarettes. There are lots of smokes out there, but only Foul tobacco comes specially treated with extra special spices to give your drawback that extra bite. So remember, if you want to be a hero like me, throw your other packs in the bin and go with Foul cigarettes. Foul by name, fabulous by flavour. Foul cigarettes! A Quackco corporation.
And that was the theme to Terraforming. Alright. Let's talk about the whole stuff about infodumps. So, infodumps, this was a news post that the lovely Pembroke Lane came up. Sorry, not Pembroke Lane. Emma Claire, the wonderful Emma Claire, came up with this this great news post, and she's giving us strategies about how to do infodumps right. Infodumps aren't necessarily bad; they're just handled badly a lot of the time. Because you as an author, when you're writing a story or doing a movie or whatever, often you haven't got the time to introduce every aspect of your world to the audience in context. There's just so much you have to focus on, and sometimes you just want to get some of that info out there a bit more quicker and a bit more lazier. Like tell people about the terrible pandemic that happened in your world, that kind of thing that would never happen in reality. The terrible zombie virus that afflicted everyone, and people didn't take precautions or wear masks, and the whole world got infected, and the lone survivors in whatever had to form their own new society. I'm dying of it at the moment.
Is actually method acting that exact infodump right now.
Exactly. I'm slowly succumbing to the damn thing. My eyes are gonna go black, and I'm just gonna start gnawing on veins pretty soon.
Consumption turning everybody into zombies again.
Exactly. Yeah. I've got rabies, consumption, AIDS, tetanus, and
you don't want to have tetanus. You don't want to have tetanus because you will be rendered basically useless.
No, all the other diseases have counteracted it and turned into a super disease. So,
okay.
Yeah, it's all working together, and that's why I'm a zombie now. There you are. See?
In other words, he took bath salts.
If you had taken the time to read my massive infodump, you would have known this already. See, that's why it's important to pay attention to infodumps.
Read the manual before reading the book.
Oh yeah, oh jeez. Or if you could be like Tolkien and have a frickin' codex in a whole book. That kind of the Silmarillion. You have to read my entire Bible in order to properly understand the context of my world. That's the king of infodumps.
Oh, he's back.
Yeah, my internet again. Another infodump for the audience.
He's back.
What?
My internet connection keeps cutting out, and I keep popping.
Your mute button keeps popping back on.
Yeah.
Stop muting yourself. Stop muting yourself.
I'm stuck.
Oh my God.
So yeah, infodumps all over the place. What?
Who's going to clean this up?
Emma Claire, yes, had great posts and great tips about it. So, have you guys ever done an infodump in your comics?
Yes.
No. Well, maybe. I have to think about it. Probably, yeah.
I don't know. I don't think you have. From my readings, from my memories of Pipface, the Pipface oeuvre, or whatever, how you say that word, I can't recall. I mean, maybe in Putrid Meat, there's hints of it, little spice, but not that much.
Little info dump of spice.
I remember. I think it was in Blitz of the, not in Putrid Meat, but it was very interesting. So I don't think it counts. Which is the story of the Bancarians, how they became Bancarians. It was an illustrated info in a sense, but it was given so organically in the story that I enjoyed it. I didn't feel that I was being dumped on.
I think that was in Putrid Meat. I think that was a little aside that Tread was making. But yeah, he kind of info dumped about the
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, how the Bunkarians kind of
Mhm.
came to be. I forgot about that. Yeah, and it didn't lead to anything. It just made me happy. So that's fine.
It fit very well with.
So yeah, you've had like flavors of info dumps when you're mentioning certain things, like the riots that happened in Septica, where Bones kind of took a leading role. There was a bit of, and Bones' past about him in an orphanage with the nuns, him and Grunt. That there was a little flavor of info dump there, but not really. They're just like anecdotes more than info dumps. But yeah, you haven't really info dumped on us yet.
Well, I'm making a great big steaming load, so prepare yourselves.
You'll bring one up. What about yours? You mentioned it, Baines. Info dumps.
Yeah, one comes to mind. I mean, this is not just normal exposition. Obviously, we're talking info dumps. One comes to mind. It was a James Bond style story, I guess, in a way, where the heroes are tied up at the end, and then the villain comes out and explains the whole plot and what's been going on, what the plan is, kind of thing. So I had one of those on a rooftop, and a character explained his traitorous motivations and like what he was trying to do and everything. And I mean, the way it was a lot, but I think I made it entertaining. I went with, I mean, since it's a comedy, like I was able to make fun of it a little bit. Character was like himself wasn't sure why he was compelled to sit there and keep explaining everything to the people he was about to kill. But it worked. I think it was a stretched out page, maybe a page and a half, and a lot of talking. But it was, I think, somewhat entertaining.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, especially if you're doing it as in a satirical way, that's rather clever, actually. Instead of just doing it as a plain, straight info dump. There's a meta reason for doing it.
Yeah, I mean, I was explaining the story, so I don't know. I don't know technically. I guess people would probably have different takes on it, but yeah, I was pretty happy with the way I did it. And I mean, to me as a reader, I would have wanted to know what's going on.
Yeah,
now
absolutely.
That we're reading this guy, who's the bad guy? And
there's good ways and bad ways to do it too. It's not like saying, we're not saying that if you've ever had an info dump, you're a bad writer and you should be ashamed. Sometimes it is necessary, but do it in a way that's going to be entertaining. And if it's includes something that the readers are going to have to remember through your story, make sure you make it memorable.
Right.
Like making it funny, like you did.
Yes. Another way that an info dump can happen without the audience actually realizing that it's an info dump, could be through an argument. Something like an interaction, a dialogue that raises stakes. In an argument, we often throw information at the other person that the other person already knows because we want to either hurt them or spite them or remind them or, make a position, communicate the known to this person. So it is perfect for info dumping because you don't really need to say, as you probably know, you did this, this, and that. You are going to be angry and you're going to be shouting, how dare you talk to me like this, you who did this, this, and that. The other person knows it, but now the audience knows it too, and it was communicated organically. And then the other person can rebound saying that this is not the whole picture. You go on over things that happened in the past that you cannot actually show because they happened off camera or before the actual story started, and so on and so forth. And the audience becomes invested, knows what happened, has been told what happened, but at the same time, it was done in a way that also gives information about the characters doing the info dump and, not being like pausing the story to give you the information and then continuing the story again.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've seen, I listen to a lot of radio plays on BBC Radio 4, and they have these info dumps within arguments that the characters do, and sometimes it's really obvious when it's like not done so well because the characters follow tropes, which is a very common thing in British BBC writing. They have so many tropes. And when the couple, like, they follow a particular like formula for their argument. So, oh, you never satisfy me. Oh, I'm thinking about leaving you. Those kind of arguments. It's like, oh, stop bringing up that time. It was like, just a one-off thing, I swear. That kind of stuff that's done 750,000 million times in stories where, the characters are complaining about infidelity and something simmering and, ruining the relationship and that's going to come back as something bigger. So yeah, the characters are sort of going over that old ground. So yeah, that's an extremely common way. So it can be done really effectively and, like Tant says, very engagingly, but it can also be, if it's very tropey and follows a formula, then it becomes obvious. And anytime something is very tropey and formulaic, that becomes cliche, and cliches are bad.
One of the only times I can see it really being appropriate for it to be like bare bones, like scrolling text on a screen, is like if you're reminding people of something that happened last time, so last time when it's hard for me not to say last time on Dragon Ball Z, but no, that would be odd. That's an info dump, and that was quite necessary. This, Frieza blew up a planet, or he tried to cut the planet, and then Goku got real mad, and then all this stuff. And at those moments, it's fine to be straight to the point. This, and this happened. But you still don't want it to be super long.
Yeah.
Because no one's ever going to retain it. Like if it's, it's a boredom thing.
Another
it's
way,
not gonna matter to anyone.
Another way that you can do an info dump is by making a character, not making the character the info dump character, but just giving certain traits to a character that would make them more likely to give information in specific contexts. And I'm thinking, for example, Basil in Without Moonlight is a lawyer, and he's wordy by nature. He talks a lot. And he has a lot of commentary to run when he is given the opportunity. So I have used him for some infodump when he was giving a pep talk to Diomedes, trying to tell him that he needs to get cleverer with his war bravado, and explaining why, like using a short story to tell the kid how to navigate life from there on. So this little story that he said was also an infodump to give a background on what had happened in Greece, like giving a short little history lesson, quote unquote, without it sounding hopefully like a history lesson, because he was telling the story on purpose to the kid in order to illustrate a point that he was trying to make. And so the infodump was serving a purpose within the story, while also giving the audience insights into the conditions at the front before the occupation that I also wanted to show. So this is also another way to do an infodump. But if it wasn't Basil who likes to talk, another character would have found some other way to give the pep talk to the kid and not the story. So it had to be him and not, for example, Martha or someone else.
I don't know if I've done it in Pinky TA. I've mostly avoided that. I think I just do little tiny mentions of stuff rather than actually give info dumps. Like I say, in Tunisia, at the moment, or something like that. Right. I don't actually explain things. I never explain what a tromper is, or.
Well, have you ever, like, in a past scene, maybe, like, how they were going to have this exhibition by, like, their war machines and that kind of stuff, and were some of the characters kind of standing around and, like, talking about that, maybe, like, what they were kind of doing there, what they were expecting, and it wasn't info dumpy at all, but I mean, like, the kind of
no
explaining, huh?
Even when they're standing around chatting, they're sort of just saying, just complaining about stuff rather than explaining what's happening. They're just saying, yeah, tomorrow we have to do this, and like, oh, damn, it's not working. Rather than actually explaining to the audience what's actually going to happen. It's like just normal.
Yeah, no, I mean, you do it organically. I wasn't trying to say that. Never mind.
I think I did it in the beginning of Pinky TA. Something, I don't know. It's just not something that.
No, I think what Pete Face said is accurate in the sense that you do have people, like characters, giving background information within the story, but it feels like they would be giving this information in quote unquote real life. For example, you never say what a tromper is, but we see it. It's illustrated. Nobody needs to actually describe what a tromper is. We just need to realize that when they refer to tromper, it is this machine on two legs.
Yes.
Which is really not the most elegant way to describe it, but yeah. So the idea is that if you had someone describe what a tromper is when we actually see the damn thing, then that would be an info dump. And it would be wrong, quote unquote, wrong, in a wrong approach, not the best approach to describing the world, to immersing the audience in the world. So.
Yeah.
One of the classic infodumps that people will think about is the start of Star Wars, and we've talked about this a million times before in different ways, different contexts, with the text crawl, which of course wasn't an infodump at all because it didn't give you. It was originally it was just a stylistic thing. It wasn't actually giving you information about what was going to happen in the movie or where the movie started. It was referring to fake movies and fake stories that had already come before, in the style of Flash Gordon, which is what it was deliberately aping, and that's what it was for. It's come to be sort of thought of like an infodump, but it never really was originally. It's like almost the way Tarantino did the whole what was his stuff? His Grindhouse film. So he did these like fake Grindhouse
Death
films.
Proof?
Yeah, Death
Oh,
Proof
yeah.
and the other one. So he was like doing these fake Grindhouse films. Grindhouse films are movies that would like splice together and stuff like this, and shown in these crappy cinemas. And Star Wars was similar to that in that he's stylistically making a film and using that text scroll to directly reference those little tiny shorts that are done with those old style fantasy things like Buck Rogers and Flash Gordon that used to be shown in the cinemas in pieces. Like you'd see one episode before a main feature, and then you'd see another episode before another main feature. That would keep you coming back to the cinema, and Star Wars was just homage to that kind of world of cinema because that's what he was into, and that's the whole reason for the bloody text crawl. It was never a prologue, and it was never an info dump, even though we've because the franchise became successful, people have mined every single part of Star Wars to use, and eviscerated the carcass and made something out of everything.
I'm thinking though, there are some kinds of stories where an introduction of infodump is not only acceptable but expected, and it doesn't tire the audience, and that would be fairy tale. The classic book opening scene, where the book opens and it starts literally, once upon a time there was this and that, and he did this and this. Like even Shrek starts that way. So
once upon a time, yeah.
Yeah. So it's not the way that you do info dumps and the way that you relay massive amounts, quote unquote, again, of information varies, and the style and what is acceptable can vary with the type of story that you're saying, that you're telling. In the sense that if you are telling a fairy tale, people will expect you to just info dump the setting and then move on to the story, to the characters interacting with this setting that you have just described. Like there was this kingdom and there was this king who was good. But now something happened, bad witch or bad wizard did this and that, and now we have our story and we begin, for example. But of course, those info dumps are again very schematic and very short, and they build a very, very specific and loose framework, and then we get to meet the characters and see them do the things that we are told in the beginning that they are or that they are doing and stuff like that. Like you don't get exempt from setting up the story normally afterwards, but you can have, like you have this leeway of opening the story with an info dump, is what I'm saying. Is there are some formats where this is acceptable and people are not thrown off.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It just has to be done in a good way.
It's
sometimes.
interesting the way you talk about that because that's a stylistic thing for fairy tales, and it's expected, and it's good. Um, in another way, sci-fi for many years what was all aping Star Wars because that was just the thing. It was successful, so we want to follow the same formula, and everybody had a text crawl. There's a lot of old sci-fi if you go back to the 80s. I don't know, they might have done it in the 90s too. They had frickin' text crawls in the beginning, and you had to read through it. Even anime was doing it as well. You had to read through the damn stuff, and that was just what they did. But it wasn't like in the classic fairy tale way. It was just copying Star Wars in a kind of stupid, misunderstanding way. The way, people do when something's popular and good, and they don't do it for the right reasons. And it never worked. It was always freaking clumsy, and you had to read through this boring text, and it didn't give you any real kind of setup or help for how the story was going to be. It was just terrible. It was always about, yes, in the 1990s, there was a terrible disease that wiped out half the population, and the survivors are grimly surviving together, and, hunting for water and technology on the wasteland.
And it'll show just like a background of like a dusty wasteland, if that, or something like that. And the thing is, for visual mediums like movies and comics, infodumps like that often just end up very ugly. For instance, when you have somebody, so if you have a scene that's an infodump, and I'm saying something that's like just made to get the information out, it's not inspired to be more than it is. What happens a lot of times then is you get talking heads, right? And panels full of huge speech bubbles that just take up the whole thing and go and go and go and go and go. And it's kind of sad because comics being a visual medium, you can do so much more with that. The way people emote and express themselves, different points of view that you can turn the camera and stuff like that. If you're not doing any of that kind of thing in your infodump, it shows me that there's not really any interest behind it. You're not putting more into it than you absolutely have to, which is really sad. You're just kind of, you have these tools at your disposal to make it something more interesting, And then, but I think, when people make these bigger info dumps and stuff like that, I think they feel compelled to be like, all right, I have to get this all out here in this one go as quick as I can, stuff this 2 pages up with dialogue, and then roll on. And it's like you want to just dump the info and run off as quick as you can. And it's just not a good way to go about it. You're really not utilizing the craft of what comic books can be. The same thing with movies that start with those. It's the same way that those movies that start with scrolling info dumps are very off-putting a lot of times because you're sitting down again to watch a visual medium, a visual storytelling, and there's nothing wrong with having to read, but it's just not compelling.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, but why should you be reading on the screen anyway? You've got a movie, you've got sound, you've got visuals. You could do so much.
Yeah, it's a disconnect. It's a total disconnect. Same thing with pages that are full of balloon bubbles that you can't penetrate. It's a total disconnect.
Exactly.
I
I remember. Oh,
I was
please.
going to say, I think one of the reasons they sometimes do it in film as well is when they don't have the money. They just don't have the money for this part.
Yeah.
So they do an info dump instead because it's cheaper. So it's just that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Go on, tons.
Yeah. No, I wanted to just offer like an example of a text in a movie that served as a, I guess, infodump, but it really helped the movie, at least the way I remember it. It's a movie that I don't think has very good reviews, although I liked it. I liked the premise and I liked the story and the characters and everything. I mean, I liked it. And it's about the, I don't remember the title, but it is about this dystopian society where people uh, don't pay things in money, but they pay in time from their lives. And they have this digital clock that counts backwards. Um, and if it goes down to zero, they die. Or they can live forever if they have infinite hours on the clock, um, which was a very interesting premise because this was like a quote unquote moneyless society, but the money that they were paying was a lot more visceral in the sense that they were literally paying with time, years of their life. If and some like those that were paupers were living hour to hour, like they had like 3 hours on the clock at any given moment, and the rich people had centuries.
Hmm.
So the info dump on this movie, the text begins with two lines. This is a moneyless society. Now everything is valued in time, and that's it. And to me that was extremely intriguing because it gives you the premise immediately, but nothing else. And you have to question yourself, okay, how is this happening? And then you have a scene that shows you how this works. That's sort of like a very small short text introducing a concept but not completely describing a concept can be a nice way of introducing your audience into something, like giving them a bit
Yeah,
of an idea and then
tantalize.
exactly, and then illustrating that idea by showing it and taking it off from there. That I think also can work very well. So yeah, that I wanted to say that. So
Can anyone think of their favourites? Obviously, like a really good example of an infodump somewhere that obviously it's not good enough that they didn't have to do an infodump, but it was an infodump, but it was done well.
It's hard to think of one off the top of my head, I think, because to me, a lot of times if it's done well, it's not going to stick out. So I'm also kind of brain dead too. So
I think that's true. Like if it works, it's like so many things. If it's working, you can't like you don't even notice it.
yeah,
I do like the one. I don't know if you guys know The Big Lebowski,
yeah,
but there's one part where the Big Lebowski's daughter, who's this like very eccentric character artist, tells the story of her father and why he actually, spoiler alert, he's not as rich as he comes across. And she believes this kidnapping plot, there's this sort of like noir kind of kidnapping plot going on. The father's remarried with this young wife and who's been kidnapped. And she's like, no, I don't believe like this woman is taking my father for the proverbial ride. And she's like, her character is like so eccentric. And she tells this long story explaining all this stuff, but it's really funny, and because of her, and also because the main character, like the dude, is like all he cares about is his rug that he no longer has. So he keeps interrupting to ask about, his rug and how to get his rug back, and he's like not really following the story. And it's a pretty big info dump. It's important to the plot, but it's really funny and fun to listen to because it's kind of broken up well, and it's
Yeah.
delivered in a humorous way and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah,
Probably
yeah.
my favorite that pops to mind.
Yeah, it's a damn good film, Big Lebowski. Um, Coen Brothers
Another
fan?
one. Oh, oh.
I was just going to say, Coen Brothers often do that, don't they? Yeah, it's not an
Yeah, they
isolated
did another
thing.
one called, I think it's called The Man Who Wasn't There. I don't know if this qualifies as an info dump, but it just comes to mind anyway, where this guy never talks. The main character never talks. And like all the characters around him are talking. But he has there's these long stretches of silence. And somehow you can imagine yourself in the scene and like how weird it must feel. But he does a massive like voiceover through the whole movie.
The
The
Chance?
character is like never speaks. So.
Ah, I haven't watched that one. The Chance.
Yeah, if it counts for an info dump, I saw Logan yesterday or the day before. I don't remember. I have lost my day count. But I saw Logan, and they have a very nice scene where the villain and Wolverine are sort of facing off, and they try to goad each other. So the villain says, "I am the one that killed off your kind," and Wolverine is confused, and he explains how this happened, how they basically eliminated most of the mutants. And then Wolverine says, "Okay, then I am the one that killed your father." And so the way that they are goading each other, but we learn what happened, and we are watching the setting the way it is being presented. And I think that it is done pretty well because you want Wolverine to get back at the evil guy, and the evil guy responds in a way that carries the conversation before, the conversation dissolving. But you walk away from that scene having learned what happened, first of all, after a long time, and also having a sense of satisfaction at how the scene concludes. I just don't want to say how for spoilers. So there you go.
Yeah, I was thinking in terms of more Coen Brothers. Raising Arizona, which is one of my favorite films. There's a lot of voiceovers by Nicolas Cage's character, and that the info dumps definitely, that is like classic info dump. But even so, it really works in the context of the film and the world because it sets it up like a fairy tale, like Tance was talking about with the whole Once Upon a Time sort of thing. It's like him giving him giving a little narrative to his life story, and commentary on his life story, almost like a documentary. So it's just works so freaking well. So I think what was it? Raising Arizona. Yeah, I think that is a really fantastic example of an info dump done well, and it's not because they had to do an info dump. It's because it works narratively within the story to do it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
It's really tricky to talk about because often you do info dumps because you need to get a bit of information out there, and there's no other way to do it that you can think of easily and quickly and fast. And often it would be better to to show but not tell and have that within the story. But in this example, it's better that it is done in that way in order to just be part of the story. It's more like it's more like giving the scene and the story more flavor, if that makes sense. More meaning just by adding this little bit extra on top of it, rather than, this is a supplement. So yeah, that's a good example of it. I'm happy I came up with thanks, Baines, with your Coen Brothers reference. So, they do that sort of in another way, say in Run Lola Run, which is a really fantastic film where you have the three kind of alternative futures of what can happen to Lola in the story as she's trying to get there in time to see her boyfriend, and they have various disasters because of things happen too quickly or too soon or whatever. And in that, she's running along trying to get to this meeting with her boyfriend in time, and she trips over a person, and the person falls over or something bad happens. And so what they do in the movie is they give you a quick kind of flash forward of what happens to the character because of this, just all in photos, just like a mosaic of a whole bunch of photos. And, they show, this is what happened to this character after this chance meeting. So it's like a visual info dump. So rather than actually showing you, a full motion effect of what's, like a video of what's happening to this character, it's just like a whole bunch of photos. So it's really an info dump, but in a visual way, completely like opposite to the text visual. Just a text info dump. So yeah, there are different ways of doing it.
Yeah.
Right.
I highly recommend Run Lola Run. Everyone has to watch it. It's compulsory to your life. And if you haven't seen it, then
I've never seen it. Yeah, but
that's not a good sign. You're a film guy, Baines. You need to see it.
You are supposed to have seen every film on the face of
German too.
You're right. I know.
So Pitt, you
I was
should
watching
love
Captain America: Civil War over and over instead by accident.
Terrible taste.
I've seen it a long time ago, though, like every other movie that I ever mentioned ever.
Oh, so you have seen it, Pitt?
Yeah, probably probably 12, 13 years ago, though, so.
Tell us about it. Do an info dump.
Well, it's about
theater.
Lola, and it's in German.
Well, I was thinking more your experience of where you rented it, what you ate while you watched it.
I just imagined the whole thing. It was a fever dream. And you can credit my imagination with having such a very clever way of distilling information. So you're welcome, Mom. Thank you.
I watched it in an outdoor cinema years and years ago when it first came out. And oh my god, after watching that, it fired my imagination, and I just wanted to draw that character. And it was like, she was a bit of an influence on Pinky TA. Pinky TA was already created at that stage, but
that's cool.
It influenced me on Pinky's character, and also just, the comic in general, having a female character who had such a good personality like that, and someone who's not like completely heroic, and disasters can happen to them and they still power on regardless, and it's someone who's extremely motivated by their wish to complete something regardless of what's going to happen to them. And that's what I got out of the film. So yeah, I really, really loved it.
Oh wow, man! Wow, you just sold me on this. I really want to see it now, actually.
Yeah, well.
What about the scene in Pulp Fiction where Christopher Walken tells the story of the watch and how it goes?
Yeah.
I don't know if that counts as an info dump, more as an anecdote, though.
I don't know if it does either. Yeah, that's true.
It's like an interesting story, and he tells us about it, and it also comes back to having, the whole watch thing, doesn't it?
Yeah, because it's
it's relevant.
It's like why the watch is important to him.
Yeah. But it wouldn't have worked if they had like a whole prologue scene of him in Vietnam. That would have been pretty shit.
No.
Yeah, you're not gonna. Sometimes you have to tell and not show. Yeah, exactly. Good point.
And doing it that way too puts you more in Bruce Willis's spot. Like, you experience it from his perspective, and that's what you need more at that point, because Bruce Willis wasn't there when his father was in Vietnam. He couldn't visualize, or he wasn't seeing what was going on. So that's why it wouldn't have meant anything to us as viewers to see that. It's more impactful that we heard the story as he was hearing it, because it had an impact on him. That story.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So the meaning of the meaning of the bit is him learning it from his crazy uncle, or whoever that was, the Christopher Walken character, learning it from that crazy old guy, and his experience as a little boy, sort of being sort of terrified and fascinated as he's learning about this horrible watch that he's getting.
Yeah, and again, you're entertained as you're hearing it. You don't feel like you're getting an unnecessary piece of information. Or even if it is necessary, you don't feel like you're just like it's just being told to you. You again, you feel like you're experiencing it, and then the parts about the story about smuggling it back in his ass and stuff, that sticks with you. When you think about Pulp Fiction, that's one of the key things that you remember.
That's right.
You're like, what? So it's good in that way. It's interesting. It's fun. I don't know if it's fun, but I don't know. Put more adjectives in here that you think I mean.
It's transcending.
It's transcending.
That's the
My
best
favorite
one.
part is always when he says he died of dysentery. Give me the watch.
Yeah.
Say that over.
Yeah.
Died of dysentery. Give me the watch.
It's Christopher Walken on top of it. Like, he's going to make anything.
Yes.
If you're going to have an info dump, have Christopher Walken.
That's what I was going to say. If you can find a way to have Christopher Walken do it, then.
I like the way you put that. It's Christopher Walken on top of it. It's Christopher Walken all over it.
He was walking all over that scene with his Christopher legs. Yes.
It's a little bit. You can go with this. You can go with that. You can go with this. You can go with that. Oh, jeez. All right. Well, I think we should wrap it up, guys. What do you reckon?
Yeah, we're blessed that you hung in here for the rest of this time. That the webcast gods were smiling on us finally.
They were doing something on us. They were info dumping all over us. Okay. Well, thank you guys for listening to QUACKCAST number 519. I've been Ozone Ocean, and I've had Baines and Pitt along with me for the ride. On Towns as well.
And Towns
here, but we would tell you, but that would be an info dump. So,
yes, long story, exactly.
Yeah, very long story.
Write her off screen.
Yeah, well,
all began 1,000 years ago.
If she hadn't have said those things on Twitter, she'd still be part of the QUACKCAST. Yeah, nonsense policy. All right, thank you guys. Bye.
Bye. Bye.